Hello, and welcome to the mentorDINO YouTube channel. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. Each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry to help foster learning, growth, and inspiration in others. Thank you all to our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So hit subscribe. It really does help others be able to discover this resource. So let's dive in. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, everyone, to the mentorDINO podcast. I'd like to welcome Corey Squire, Associate Principal and Sustainability Director at BORA Architects in Portland, Oregon. Thank you, Corey, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So would you mind telling my listeners a little bit more about yourself and how you got to BORA?
Yeah, so I guess a long twisted journey in the world of architecture and sustainability. But I'll start way back. My undergraduate degree is in environmental studies, and I did that before I pursued architecture. I ended up getting a master's degree in architecture as one of the ways that I felt most connected, kind of this idea of sustainability to kind of real people, real problems, real solutions. And I've worked within architecture firms for most of my career in this kind of sustainability leadership role. And I also, for a period of time, ran my own practice, and it was a sustainability consulting practice. The idea there was larger firms tend to have somebody on staff who's a sustainability expert or sustainability director or whatever you want to call it. But there are so many firms out there that are very interested in pursuing higher levels of sustainability, climate action, equity, all these great things that just are not large enough for a standalone expert on staff. And the idea behind my consulting firm called Department of Sustainability was to be kind of like a standalone department. So I worked with architecture firms across the country who really want to improve their performance in terms of sustainability and how to like build up capacity, build up knowledge, set a vision for what they wanted to do. And then more recently, I joined BORA Architecture Interiors in Portland, Oregon as their sustainability director. And in that role, I kind of touch on every project. I help project teams set sustainability goals. I work with the architects here on performance simulation. I talk to clients about why they should want these things that we want them to have.
Always the hard part.
Yeah, right. A lot of it is communication, and that's what we spend a lot of time doing. I like to think like knowledge and communication are the two keys to sustainable design. So those are two major focuses.
Yeah. Do you still have your own consulting firm on the side?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just like your side.
I'm multitasking.
Yeah, just like your side. I think it's something that people should generally do. It's like you don't want to commit your entire life to a company. It's important to like kind of have your own thing. So yes, I do. I do continue to consult with firms either on projects or at a kind of a firm-wide sustainability kind of visioning level, and then I kind of work at BORA and I advance their sustainability mission on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and you also mentioned you did your undergrad in sustainability. Did you just do your master's in architecture?
Right.
And then just had it transfer over so then it could be accredited? Because I think you're AIA.
Yeah, no, I am a registered architect. No, I went to grad school for architecture with the 3.5 year program. So for somebody who had no previous experience in architecture, so typical 7.5 year schooling career, but it worked out well, and I think that it's a useful way of thinking about architecture coming from the perspective of a different discipline and then applying design thinking to it.
Yeah. Are you finding more education programs are having more specialties in sustainability and connecting with the architecture degrees? I don't know if you've seen other people coming out with.
I mean, I know other people who have followed a similar path. I know a lot of people go to architecture school because they're interested in sustainability. I actually think that architecture school is a little bit behind the ball in terms of sustainability education, just like at a national level right now. one of the reasons that I wrote my book was to kind of prioritize or formalize like what sustainable design is. How do we get it into buildings? There's lots of interest and a lot of questions out there. So
So let's
formal
dive
resource, yeah.
let's dive into your book a little bit since you brought it up. So it's a brand new book. I think it came out in early November.
Yeah, it
Um,
actually published last week when we're
yeah.
recording this. Yeah.
So I think this will come out. I believe I have it on the docket for January. So if you haven't gotten it yet, it's been on the shelves. And if it hasn't been in your Christmas stocking, you can check it out. But it's People, Planet, Design, a practical guide to realizing architecture's potential. So the book is about focusing on professionals learning about sustainability and the importance of it. How
I would say that the audience is broader than that. It could be students, it could be professionals, but it's basically this idea of what is sustainability, what are we aiming for, how do we get there? Kind of like trying to create kind of like the complete package.
Yeah. Would it be helpful for clients? Because you did mention it's that communication to clients and the value of it. Would it also be helpful for them?
I think so. I think that clients and architects, not some clients are obviously architects, but a
Yeah.
lot of them not, and we kind of have a very different background and experience. Maybe even speak different languages, almost. And I think that what the book does from the perspective of a client is describes kind of what's possible, what's out there, what they could achieve in their buildings, maybe things that they aren't currently focused on or thinking about, and it could help clients ask better questions and get more out of their buildings.
What inspired you to write the book?
I was so at this time when I started writing, I was consulting full time with Department of Sustainability, and I felt like a lot of firms, diverse firms, different parts of the country, different sizes, different focuses, were all kind of asking the same question, which was, we really want to focus on sustainability. What do we do now? And it was a question that I spent a lot of time thinking about. Before I started consulting, I spent a lot of time thinking about this question from the perspective of all these different firms I was working with. But I thought the message was, it was something that people were curious. I wanted to get it out. I knew a lot of firms were struggling with the same idea, even the ones that I wasn't speaking to or working with or were aware of me or I was aware of them. So, um, and I didn't think there's something else like it. I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
books out there that describe sustainable design strategies, and this book covers that as well. But this also digs into how to organize practice around sustainability, how to identify what are the specific outcomes that we want to achieve when we think about sustainability. So we know that we're not going to get to like carbon reduction with design strategies alone. We already have all the design strategies. We basically know them, but we're not always able to implement them on projects.
Mhm.
So what are the cultural, like interpersonal kind of reasons for that, and how can we get around them, and how can we kind of advance some of these goals that a lot of people have.
Yeah. No, I just think of, I forget the exact title of the book I had to get in college, but it's a white book with like a square image in the front. It was like light
Some of the
something and
light.
design. Yes. And it's like, I think of that book whenever you describe this one, but in more like practical terms.
I mean,
And
Something with the Light is a great book. It was first published in the mid '80s. My hope is that this is the next iteration of kind of formalizing sustainability.
that would be awesome and just have it on everybody's shelves. I know it's in that cabinet if I needed to go get it. Because like I know exactly where it is. In terms of pulling back on like your career side, how do you balance your time between BORA and the consulting firm? How's that work-life balance?
Well, I think so. It's very important to me that architecture firms that are folk that want to improve on sustainability, and have and want me to help. Like, it's very important to me that I'm available to answer questions, basically. So when I was consulting full time, it was my full time job. But now I'm not doing as like in depth workshops with firms. My hope is that the book actually covers a lot of that for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I am totally available for questions. So I speak to a lot of firms. If people have questions about like what should we be prioritizing within a design process, how do you get started on post occupancy? Those are or like what should we be focused on, right? How important is FSC wood, for instance? Like what software should we be using for building performance simulation? So I mostly have kind of phone consultations, and that could just be whenever throughout the
Never.
day, right?
Yeah.
Day, evenings, weekends, whatever.
Yeah, because it's always balancing. I guess the hard part's like during work hours. Like I always try to, all my stuff's more in the evenings. So
Right.
that's why I was curious. Now, how's does your role change once you're on the firm side if somebody is looking to have a focus, director of sustainability or specialist, whatever you want to call it, for their firm?
If a firm is asking me about how to organize
How to
internally,
organize creating that role or what to look for in a professional?
yeah,
Oh,
I mean, one thing that so the first thing that I would talk to a firm about who's interested in this idea is like, do you need a director of sustainability? And some firms are kind of maybe better at self-organizing than others. Um, if you do, if you do feel like you need the role, and some firms really benefit from it, I've worked with firms on kind of developing that job description. It has to be someone who's obviously passionate about sustainability. But one thing that I describe in the book is like passion alone is not enough. You really need um, a certain level of experience and knowledge, and you have to be kind of senior enough at the firm to sit at the right tables so that you're there when decisions are made. A lot of firms make the mistake of hiring kind of a sustainability leader internally who might be passionate but not given the authority to do anything with that passion. So
hmm.
one of the conversations that I have with firms who are looking to create that role is like, how much authority you're going to give this person, and is it going to be enough to empower that person to make a real difference?
Yeah. So, what do you do differently in your role versus your consulting role? Are you doing the energy modeling? Are you
Oh yeah,
analyzing specs?
yeah.
What's your day to day
All
look
of the
like?
my I mean my the way that I think about it is like I cover like the technical expertise around things like energy simulation, materials, whatever we have to focus on. But I spent a lot of time motivating people, right? And people who are
Yeah.
focused on sustainability know that you're often like really fighting for some of these things, and you often have to convince people to prioritize the things that maybe they say are important, but they're not prioritizing, or that you think are really important. So I spend time writing memos with positions about why we think we want to take a project in a certain direction. Maybe the client has said no, and we're going to go back and try harder.
Hmm.
I do like pep talks with project teams in preparation for meetings. I want people to be. I don't want anyone to get like burnt out of the kind of like trying really hard and just like getting, I don't know, hearing no too many times, which is something in sustainability world we end up with a lot, right?
Yeah. Because it's
Everyone is well,
always you need the structure to hold up the building. So what gets cut? Like,
right.
okay,
We're not going to cut the
sustainability
structural
practices
system.
are,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
or finishes get stuff like if the more sustainable finish is more expensive, then you're going to get the argument, well, the contractor said this other item's cheaper, but then the carbon's through the roof, or
Or like
that
health
stuff.
issues, right?
Yeah,
Like if you care about the health of the people in your building, you might not want the toxic finish. It might be prudent to pay more for something that's a little bit safer.
yeah,
But people often need to be reminded of this
yeah,
because
because
you're
it's
right. If you cut the structural system, the building falls down. It's very obvious.
yeah, and the fact that you can still buy materials that are toxic, and so sometimes
It's crazy,
I
right? It's completely crazy.
I found
Yeah,
owners just think everything's perfectly fine, so why don't I get the cheaper thing? And it's like, well, no, it's not off the
yeah,
shelves yet, but this is the either hindrance or benefits depending on these products and educating them. So I think
yeah.
it,
I think that's a good point. People do think that things are available. Like if you buy food in the grocery
mhm,
store, you could be pretty clear, pretty confident that you're not going to get sick with some sort of like, I don't know, infection. Like you're not going to get E. coli, right? We
yeah,
have laws that basically say food has to be safe from certain pathogens. Now we don't have laws that say food has to be safe from like eating healthy over the course of your lifespan. Right? There's
exactly.
lots of like really kind of hazardous things out there if that's what you're eating kind of over and over again.
Yeah, you could just be eating chips, and that's probably cheaper than some of the
And
healthier
that's probably
options, but just because it's an option to buy doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. But
100%. Yeah. But yeah, so it's a good point. So we do have to, and we have to understand what the goals of our clients are. And then we have to educate them about how design decisions directly impact those goals or not.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever done like any return on investment analyses on either materials or different systems in terms of sustainable approaches?
We do it a lot, and I don't like to do it from a purely financial standpoint because it gets like it's very easy to say, let's think about energy efficiency, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can say, I'm going to pay more for this more expensive mechanical system up front, and that's going to save me X percentage or X number of dollars every year. So we have a payback of whatever after 5 or 10 years. It's very clear cut, but it's not very meaningful or impactful. If you
Yeah.
say, I'm going to put in a better filtration system in the building, and that does have an upfront cost, and the occupants are going to be healthier, and maybe or maybe not, you're going to notice that on a day-to-day basis, but after 5 or 10 years, like they will objectively be in a better position. And like, does that bring some sort of payback? Because maybe you have productivity gains, maybe you don't. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I in my book I call payback a trap. Right? It's like
Yeah.
you're optimizing for something you can calculate, not something that's important. So I think there are ways of doing it, but you got to be careful about kind of focusing too much on
The
um,
direct numbers and
yeah, direct numbers when there's a lot of really important things that are very difficult to account for.
yeah, like I know when I was in school, it was very much they were teaching sustainability, but it was like, you really got to communicate it from it'll be a better investment because that's all owners care about. I'm like,
Yeah, and
well,
it's not true, right?
not
Owners
true,
care
not
about owners care about a lot of things, a lot more than quote
yeah,
unquote the investment.
exactly. And I know you mentioned you get to jump around from all different project types. What types of projects have you worked on?
Well, so at my current firm, we do a lot of schools, we do higher ed, we do performing arts, we do affordable housing, we're doing libraries, mostly public projects. I find public projects to be especially interesting because of the funding sources, because of the values of the clients are usually, in some cases, determined by voters.
Mm-hmm.
At other firms that I've been at, I've done more private work. I've done more residential projects, um, private schools, kind of retail, those kind of things. But I mean, there's a lot of building types have different strategies that tend to be especially important. Like for housing, for affordable housing, like interior health, experience, daylight, air quality, all these things are very important. But a university project might have really ambitious carbon reduction goals because the university has like a year that they're going to hit net carbon neutrality or something like that.
Yeah. Is it hard to bounce around from different project types for different
Mm,
teams?
it's hard from a like an informational flow standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like different projects have different kind of considerations, different clients have different personalities and priorities. Gotta have to remember there's a limit to how many projects I could think about like intelligently at one time for sure.
Do you have a favorite project type to work on?
Um, let's see. So currently, I'm working on a few library projects that I've really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed working on libraries. The it's such like an ancient building type. Like libraries, I
Mm-hmm.
guess a lot of building types are somewhat ancient. Libraries have been around for thousands of years. Obviously, multifamily housing has been around for thousands of years as well. Schools as well. But just the idea that kind of this building that contains shared knowledge for a community, and anyone can just come in and take out a book, and people can spend time there without spending any money. Um, it's a really interesting building type, and I'm really happy that we, as a society, decided that libraries are important,
Mm-hmm.
and we still build them.
I feel
Um,
like a lot of them are turning more into cultural centers
a
too.
lot of them are turning. Yeah, you'll actually notice there's less space for books, more space for like gathering,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is also interesting, kind of evolution of that building type.
Yeah. And spots for you to just like leave your book on the counter and just say, I don't know how that got there if you don't have it in the library. If there's anyone listening interested in focusing their career in sustainability, do you have any advice for them in creating that path, whether they're still a student or in a firm with that passion, how do they start proving themselves into that type of leadership role?
So, I mean, not to make this a kind of like a pitch for my book, but I really did write the book with these people in mind. So
Mhm.
I do think it would be valuable. Um, Sustainability is a very specific attitude around design. And it's not like you design something and then you kind of make it sustainable later on. But sustainability is like a broadening of our concern when we're designing. So we care about obviously how things look. We also care about the health of the people. We also care about the ecology. We care about the health of the planet. And all those things kind of contribute to what the design ultimate ends up being. So just for like really considering why you're doing what you're doing, who is that benefiting, how is a design move creating value kind of beyond maybe what the client asked for or what the kind of aesthetics that you're going for are. And the other thing, the other piece of advice I would give is like go check out how the projects turned out. So we talk a lot about post occupancy. I think post
Mhm.
occupancy is one of the most important things from a sustainability standpoint. If, whether that's like checking out utility bills to see if the energy use of a building matches what was predicted, or is it good or bad?
Yeah.
Um, checking out how the like you can measure air quality, you can measure daylight, you can go to like when we make decisions, how does that impact the real world? And then obviously interviewing people, asking them how their experience in the spaces. So some of the most valuable lessons that I've learned around sustainability have come from kind of experiences doing post occupancy and evaluations.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about how you run your post occupancy evaluations? I know a lot of firms just can't find the right time to get in there from a whole design standpoint beyond sustainability. Some of the measurables are probably a little bit easier to just check any records or bills, but really getting that like perception side to make sure, what we designed helped the people of the space. And if it didn't, how can we learn from it?
The first thing I would say is like post occupancy is a pretty low bar. People often work themselves up and like we have to do this very thorough scientific evaluation, and you really don't. I mean, showing up at a completed building and making intentional observations, like are people sitting in the parts of the building what we expected them to be sitting? Maybe they are. Maybe people pulled over additional chairs because it's such a great environment that then more people want to spend time there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe nobody is where we thought they were going to be, and maybe it's too glary, right? Maybe it's too loud, right? We can understand that. So, showing up at a building and just taking pictures, observing, maybe talking to people. I mean, you can learn so much in just an hour. Same with
Yeah.
utility bills. Ask for a year of utility bills, calculate an EUI, compare that back to either a benchmark or an energy model. It's like, is this building using more energy or less energy than we thought? And then you can, from there, you can be like, well, why is that, right? It's
Yeah.
using less energy. Is that because it's not fully occupied? Or is it using more energy? And is that because we made some big mistake? Or is it because the building is so wonderful that it's getting twice as much use as we anticipated? And that really
Yeah.
matters, right? If you find that it's using more energy, it's like you got to know whether which one of those it is.
Yeah. If it's
Um,
a design or a people thing and how they're
right.
using it.
Yeah. But overall, I mean, there's I like to describe post occupancy as like this three-legged stool where in a building we use energy to alter the environment to improve the experience of people. So
Mm-hmm.
we want to make sure that people have a good experience. People have a good experience depending on partially at least the environment that they're in, which is the light, the sound, um, the temperature, their interaction with the physical space, and for the most part, we use energy to like alter the environment. So I think you have to understand those three things. Now, again, I said it's a low bar. You can understand one of those things. You can study this and not that, and it's fine. You'll learn something. But for the full picture, it's like like if you're using so much energy that you're overcooling a building so that people are less comfortable, right? That's like that would
Yeah.
be a very bad outcome, right? You can, in theory, you can make people happier by using less energy. So yeah, understanding the interaction between those three things, and then if you can connect that back to certain design decisions and see whether those are good or bad, and how can you then take those lessons into future projects.
Yeah. And so you always go on site for those because I know other architects that are super busy will tend to like, hey, let's try to send out surveys to people and see who answers things. I'm like, if people don't answer them or you don't get that why behind something. If somebody doesn't like a space, they could just say, no, I don't like the space, or give it a 1, but then you don't know if it's glare or if it's too loud or too bright. Like,
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, surveys could be useful, but you need the context behind the answers to gain anything from it.
yeah, definitely. Um, Shifting over to some of your work you do outside of all of the BORA and your consulting firm, I know you're an active AIA member with COTE, so it's Community on the Environment. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing on the committee, what that committee is about, if anybody has no idea what COTE is?
Well, I'm currently not on the Committee on the Environment. I was on the National Committee on the Environment for the AIA from 2018 to 2021. And it's a role that you apply to. It's a 3-year term. The group is about 10 people, and what they really do is kind of lead sustainability from the perspective of the institute. And when I was a member of the Committee on the Environment Advisory Group, which is what the group is called, my big focus was the framework for design excellence. So I was the lead author of the framework. I wrote most of that in around 2018, and then in 2019, our group, the Committee on the Environment Advisory Group, kind of created a resolution, sent that to the board of directors of the AIA, and we asked for a floor vote that the institute would formally adopt the framework for design excellence as kind of the definition of good design. And that vote passed. So we do have a formal kind of framework for design excellence. And if you're not familiar with it, check it out on the AI's website, but it walks through design for integration, design for energy, design for water, design for change. Basically, the idea behind it is that good design is defined by solving these problems, like addressing energy, addressing human health, addressing equity. And it's also made its way into design award programs. So the Committee on the Environment, the COTE Top 10 was the first one, but national design awards, local design awards have been adopting this. And it's been a pretty powerful tool for kind of shifting this focus, maybe away from kind of celebrating an image towards celebrating the impact and the outcomes that we can have through our design decisions.
Yeah, I'll leave a link below so anybody can go directly to that. I didn't know you were one of the authors of it, so that's a fun thing. I know our firm uses that for our design practices and doing design charrettes and letting that lead us from the start of a project.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that.
Talk about impact.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad to hear that you're using it. I think it's a valuable tool, and it was a great team of people who put that together, and it's really had legs, which I've been excited about.
Yeah, and going back to your first point when we started talking on, shifting from your education on sustainability and then going for architecture because that's where you can make an impact. That is one little piece that you made an impact, because I work for a national firm. And that's part of our design process now, and we're all over the country.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful to hear that. So, and maybe I could give that as for advice. Sustainability is a new enough field, sustainability in architecture, that there are a lot of opportunities to have a big impact.
Do you have any advice for young professionals looking to get more involved with the Committee on the Environment?
So most cities have a local COTE chapter. Before I applied for and got accepted to join the national committee, I was the chair of Committee on the Environment San Antonio. And it was a small group. San Antonio is a medium-sized city. We had maybe 10 members or so, but we did a lot of good work there, and we created some good educational programming around the topics that we thought were very important. And I know that COTE chapters around the country are doing really, really good work. So I definitely recommend getting involved with the local COTE chapter. There's a national network. Mm-hmm. So if you're involved with COTE, the national committee kind of gets all the local committees on a call once a quarter to kind of coordinate efforts between the various chapters. It's a really good community, and I'm always impressed by what the various local COTE groups are kind of creating in their communities.
Yeah, definitely. Has there been an organization that's left the biggest impact on you on your journey so far?
I mean, the AIA has really been like a nice home for me. So I got very involved with the local AIA chapter when I lived in San Antonio. And that opened doors to me at the national level. And it's just such a great community. I mean, all AIA work is volunteer work. So people do it because they're really dedicated to both advancing the profession, advancing kind of opportunities for their fellow architects, but also improving the world. Architecture has huge ability for impact, and everybody touches buildings and urban environments in different ways. So kind of small changes at the level of the profession can have really profound changes in the built environment. So part of that is like advocating for various codes, creating educational programs around anything like, I don't know, healthy materials or carbon reduction or whatever else. So it's been in terms of kind of my career path, the AA has been a really important part of that.
As far as mentorship in your career, how has that influenced your career in any way?
I've been lucky. I've had really great mentors, and the reasons I've been able to do what I have been able to do has really been because of the mentors that I've had. So I've been very thankful for that. Mentorship is super important, and I try my best to kind of hand that off to create mentorship opportunities for others. I'm happy. I love talking to people about sustainability and the opportunities within a firm to advance that and to kind of allow people to just like, if they're passionate about sustainability, find those opportunities to kind of like push those ideas forward and follow their passion in those directions.
Do you have any advice for young professionals starting out their careers?
I would say, so one thing that I'll say is that...
Besides read your book.
Something I describe in my book is that the way that architecture practiced today has not resulted in the outcomes that we would have hoped for. So, I mean, our buildings use way more carbon than we otherwise should. You mentioned before, there's lots of toxic materials that are just on the market that you can purchase them. And there are opportunities to change a lot of this so that maybe we can create a built environment in the future, which is healthier, which is more responsible from a global climate standpoint, which is more equitable. So don't learn too much about the current state of the profession. As a young professional, obviously you have to learn a lot. You have to know how projects are run. You have to know how firms bill and make money. You have to know how various building components come together, and all that stuff is super important. But remain skeptical. Learn the things that are important, but don't think that the way that you should practice is the way that we are practicing right now. Recognize what those differences are and learn enough so that you can make the points, so that you can kind of convince whoever it is that we're not going to use that toxic chemical because it is toxic and because it's a better option out there.
Yeah. And I know even construction's slower moving to adjust to different practices, or when rain screens were introduced, everybody was very skeptical. Right. Anytime we push those boundaries, there's always different kinds of pushback.
Yeah, change is definitely slow. I mean, it could happen at the level of a generation, right? So you just think about people entering the profession now. Like think about the outcomes you want. Think about the world that you want to live in, and try to identify kind of what you could do in your projects that can result in those good outcomes.
I was in an AIA workshop and we were looking at climate change and the waters rising and what that does to all of our cities that are on the coast. And if everything rises, then is it a big, everybody's moving to more inland locations? How does that climate change really impact the built environment, and what happens when that does occur?
So, yeah, and I guess that's another piece. Like if you started your career 30 years ago, I mean, the climate has changed, but for the most part, you were operating in the same kind of general conditions, but things are shifting faster. People entering the profession now are going to have to be flexible in that they're designing projects for very different conditions and different conditions over the lifespan of the buildings that are built today.
Yeah. And even just like the 100-year floods or 100-year storm events, or
right, none of that matters. It's not real anymore, right?
Yeah. If I'm looking at the wind for my region, it's like, well, do I actually want to listen what's on the chart now, or do I want to go to the next worst condition, assuming that that's all going to change? It's like when you look at codes, what are you designing to?
Right.
If you're taking the next step or looking a couple years down the line.
Yeah, if you're designing a building in New York, for instance, you might want to see how it performs in Washington, D.C., right? Because
Yeah.
the building will stay put, but the climates will be shifting upwards around it.
Yeah. Or if the first floor becomes a foundation, if
Right.
it's just flooded.
Yeah.
Never know. Is there anything else I missed on sustainability, your career, and any advice you've learned along the way?
One thing that I learned when I started my career, and I was very focused on technical design solutions. I was very focused on things like energy modeling. Thought that the world could be solved through like calculations alone. But what I learned over time is that the way that you change anything is really through connections with people. So think about like who makes decisions in different areas, what's important to them, how can you change minds through like conversation or friendship or like various things like that. It just seems like we often think about like hard solutions for soft solutions, or maybe like technical versus human solutions, and really understanding like culture at an interpersonal level and leverage points there is how you make change.
100% agree. I always say architecture is more about relationships than design in
100%
every
right. And
facet.
sustainability is the same thing. Sustainability is about relationships, right? You got to know the right design strategies, but that's only going to get you so far.
So if anyone's looking to get a hold of you or needs some consulting or input on sustainability, what's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
I guess I can provide my email in your show notes. It's going to be the
Or
easiest
I
thing.
can put your website. I can
Yes, you
always
could
do
put
that too.
you could put my website, departmentofsustainability.com.
And I'll
And
leave a link to your book so that everybody can
perfect.
get their copy if they haven't gotten it from Christmas.
Yeah, and I mean I'm always happy to talk about sustainability in architecture and like the paths that are available to like prioritize sustainability or focus on sustainability as part of an architecture career.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Corey, for speaking to me. I am sure everyone is going to love this conversation.
Well, thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Check out the description below for any resources, links, and contact information we discussed. Did you like the conversation today? Is there something you'd like to know more about or a topic I should cover? Leave me a comment below and I will see what I can do to best answer your questions. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. It does really help others be able to find this resource to have larger conversations. So leave me a comment and subscribe. I really appreciate your support.